alien prince was thrown into the furnace, until a human dragged him back from fire. The furnace chamber was never meant to be seen by human eyes, let alone witnessed as the place of execution for someone who once carried a crown. It was a relic of the warship's old days, a massive reactor pit repurposed into a place where prisoners vanished, their screams swallowed by the roar of fire and metal, where loyalty was tested by brutality and fear became the air that soldiers breathed. Kai had been ordered to report there that morning, the summons coming through the intercom with that flat, metallic voice of the captain who never explained his reasons. He had walked the steel corridors with the weight of dread pressing on him, though he was no stranger to horror. He had fought in sieges where the sky burned and seen bodies drift in vacuum, but there was something different about being summoned to the furnace chamber. It felt deliberate, personal, as though he was being forced to watch something he would never unsee. The blast doors groaned open with hydraulic strain, and the heat rolled out like a living thing, pressing against his face and filling his lungs with the metallic tang of scorched air. The pit itself was a sun-contained, fire and plasma swirling in a massive containment field that hissed and flared like the breath of an ancient beast. And there, suspended above the fire by chains that glowed red with heat, was the alien prince. He was half-conscious, his skin blistered in places, his lips cracked, his body shaking against the unbearable heat. Kai had heard whispers of him before, an heir to a fallen dynasty, captured in a raid, considered more valuable as a symbol broken than as a prisoner exchanged. They said he was dangerous, not because of weapons, but because of what he represented, hope to a conquered people. The soldiers around the pit laughed crudely, tossing cruel remarks, their faces illuminated by the flames below. The captain stood at the railing, arms behind his back, his uniform immaculate, despite the oppressive heat. His voice carried with sharp cruelty as he announced that today, the crew would be reminded of what defiance cost. He spoke of the alien prince as though he were an object, a piece of propaganda, a monster dressed in regal skin. And then he turned his gaze to Kai, singling him out in front of everyone, ordering him to bear witness, to see what loyalty to the fleet demanded. Kai stood stiff, his jaw clenched, sweat running down his temples, but he said nothing. The alien prince lifted his head weakly, his eyes, those strange, luminous eyes that carried the shimmer of a night sky, locking onto Kai's with something more powerful than words. They were not the eyes of a monster. They were not the eyes of an enemy. They were simply eyes that belonged to someone who had been broken, yet still refused to bow. Kai felt the fire burning in the pit reflected inside him, not in heat, but in anger, and in that moment, he hated the captain more than he had ever hated anyone. The order was given to lower the chains further, closer to the fire. The soldiers jeered, the shadows long and distorted on the furnace walls, and the alien prince's scream cut through the chamber like tearing metal. It should have sounded alien and human, but to Kai it was simply pain. The same pain he had heard from wounded comrades, from civilians caught in crossfire, from children on burning worlds. His fists curled at his sides until his nails dug into his palms. The captain turned his cold gaze back on Kai, studying him as if waiting for a reaction, as if this was not only punishment for the alien prince, but a test for the human soldier. Would he laugh? Would he sneer? Would he prove his loyalty by mocking the suffering of their enemy? But Kai remained silent, his face a mask though his chest burned with restrained fury. Inside, he thought of all the times he had seen cruelty dressed as discipline, violence painted as necessity. He thought of how many times he had stood by, silent, when orders clashed with conscience. He thought of the faces of the dead that came back in his dreams, not enemies, but innocents, always innocents. And he thought of the alien prince, whose crime was not monstrosity, but existing as the wrong bloodline in the wrong war. The furnace chamber roared louder, the air trembling with heat, as the chains creaked and lowered another notch. The prince convulsed, his skin blistering further, his breath ragged. Kai took a step forward before he realized it, his instinct overriding discipline, and several soldiers turned their eyes on him, waiting for him to speak, waiting for him to slip. He stopped himself, his teeth grinding, his mind screaming. He forced himself to remember survival, that if he acted rashly, he would be dragged into the furnace alongside the prince. But in that silence, the alien prince's gaze found his again, steady despite the agony, and in it Kai saw a plea without words, a question that cut through heat and fire and ranks of soldiers. Will you let them do this to me? The captain finally dismissed the crew, ordering the furnace to remain active as the prince's chains were locked in place. The soldiers filed out laughing, muttering about how long he'd last, betting on whether his body would be ash by morning. Kai lingered, pretending to adjust a tool belt, his body tense, waiting until the chamber emptied and the sound of boots faded down the corridor. When the heavy door sealed shut behind the last man, the chamber grew quieter except for the relentless hum of the furnace and the ragged breaths of the prince. Slowly, cautiously, Kai approached the railing. The prince lifted his head weakly, his lips trembling as he tried to form words, but only managed a hoarse rasp. Kai leaned closer, and for the first time, he heard the alien's voice, broken but alive, whispering something that sounded like help. That single word shattered every wall Kai had built. He could not tell himself this was just another prisoner. He could not tell himself this was mercy better left undone. He could not tell himself that silence was survival. Because here was someone about to be burned alive for the satisfaction of power, someone who had done nothing but be born in the wrong bloodline. Kai felt the decision ignite inside him like the furnace itself. He could not save everyone. He could not undo the war. But he could save this one life. And maybe, in doing so, he could save himself from drowning in silence forever. He scanned the chamber, his soldier's instincts calculating risk, the cameras mounted on the far walls, the patrol schedule he knew too well, the emergency override panel near the catwalk. He moved quickly, his hand steady even as his heart thundered, accessing the panel with codes he wasn't supposed to know but had learned long ago, a habit from surviving in a fleet where knowledge meant leverage. The chains groaned as he released the locks, and the prince sagged, barely held by what little strength remained in him. Kai hauled at the emergency lever, a screech of machinery filling the chamber, and the chains jerked upward, away from the flames. The prince's body swung toward the catwalk, and Kai reached out, grabbing him with both arms, dragging his blistered form onto the steel floor. The smell of burned flesh hit his nose, sharp and nauseating, but he didn't let go. For a heartbeat, the two of them just breathed, one collapsed in pain, the other shaking with adrenaline. The alien prince opened his eyes, clouded with exhaustion, yet still shimmering faintly with that strange light. His cracked lips parted, as if to speak, but no sound came. Kai pressed a hand against his shoulder and whispered harshly, "Don't speak. Just hold on." His voice carried more desperation than he intended. Already, alarms were beginning to hum somewhere deeper in the ship. The system had detected unauthorized override. Kai knew the crew would come, that the captain would not forgive. He knew that dragging the alien prince from a furnace was the beginning of something he couldn't turn back from. But he also knew, as he lifted the prince onto his shoulder and prepared to run, that he had made the only choice he could live with. And as the doors hissed open, heat at his back and alarms in his ears, Kai realized the war for his soul had just begun. The medbay aboard the warship Resolute Dawn was dimly lit, its sterile light panels flickering as though the ship itself were unsettled by the presence of the alien prince. He lay on the gurney, his skin still marred by burns that shimmered in strange, iridescent hues as though his biology refused to be fully understood by human medicine. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, labored, but steady, a sign of stubborn survival. Beside him, Nathan sat slouched against the wall, still in his scorched uniform, the acrid scent of smoke clinging to him like a second skin. His hands were raw from dragging the alien prince from the furnace, and though the ship's medic had urged him to get treatment, Nathan had refused to leave the prince alone. For the first time since that impossible rescue, silence stretched between them, but it was not a comfortable silence. It was the silence of two men caught between two wars, one outside in the void of space, and one inside their very bodies, where trust battled against memory. The alien prince's eyes fluttered open, revealing the piercing crystalline blue that seemed carved from glacial ice, and he regarded Nathan with a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. "Why?" he rasped, his voice like cracked glass scraping against stone. "Why would a human pull me from fire meant to kill me? Do you not understand that my people are sworn to burn yours from stars?" Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice was low, steady, worn with exhaustion but edged with conviction. "Because no one deserves to die like that. Not you. Not anyone. Whatever you've done. Whoever you are. A furnace isn't justice. It's cruelty." The prince's lips curled as though in bitterness, though the gesture seemed weak. "You would risk your life for your enemy. Either you are a fool, or you are dangerous in ways I have yet to understand. Nathan did not deny it. Instead, he looked at the strange pattern of scars across the prince's forearm, marks that glowed faintly as though his blood carried light instead of iron. Maybe I am a fool, but I couldn't let them burn you alive. It wasn't right. The prince fell silent, his gaze drifting to the ceiling, his breath rattling. In the quiet, the hum of the ship was broken by sudden alarms that blared through the med bay like a scream. Red lights bathed the room, and a voice crackled over the comms. Enemy ships detected. Multiple signatures. Boarding parties inbound. Nathan's blood ran cold. He knew what that meant. The war was far from over. He looked down at the alien prince, who now struggled to sit up despite his injuries. "They're coming for you," Nathan said grimly. "They know you survived." The prince's jaw tightened, and for the first time, his tone carried no scorn, only certainty. "And they will not stop until I am ash, or reclaimed." Nathan knew his duty as a soldier. The right thing to do, by protocol, would be to secure the alien prince as a prisoner, to hand him back to command, to let the ship's officers decide what to do. But Nathan also knew what command would choose. They had thrown the prince into the furnace once. They would not hesitate to finish what they started. Nathan stood, his pulse hammering in his ears. He made a decision in that moment that would sever him from his chain of command forever, then remove. Now, if they board, this med bay will be the first place they search. You're not safe here. The prince frowned, his expression unreadable beneath the weight of exhaustion and fire scars. "You would protect me from your own kind." "Why?" Nathan moved to the supply cabinet, grabbing a discarded pulse pistol and strapping it to his thigh. "Because I saved you once. I'm not about to let it be for nothing." The alien prince hesitated, then forced himself upright with a grimace, every movement betraying pain. He staggered, but Nathan caught his arm, steadying him. The prince's skin was hot, almost fevered, his pulse racing unnaturally fast. "You will regret this," the prince murmured, though his voice sounded less like a threat and more like a weary warning. Together, they slipped from the med bay into the corridors of the Resolute Dawn. The ship trembled with the impact of docking clamps as enemy ships latched onto its hull. Gunfire echoed faintly from distant decks, mingled with the screams of crew caught in the first wave of boarders. Nathan led the prince through narrow maintenance passages, avoiding patrols of his own crewmates. The alien prince struggled with each step, but his will seemed unbreakable, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark corridors as though lit by some inner fire that the furnace had failed to consume. Nathan's mind raced. Every door he opened, every junction he turned, he knew he was deepening his betrayal. Already, his comm buzzed with orders he ignored. He was branded a deserter the moment he chose to lead the prince to safety instead of containment. But he pushed on. They reached the hangar bay, where the chaos was worst. Fire spilled from ruptured fuel lines, smoke filling the air, alarms howling like dying animals. Human soldiers exchanged gunfire with alien intruders, the clash of two empires reduced to the brutal intimacy of close combat. Nathan crouched behind a half-destroyed shuttle, pulling the prince down with him. "If we can get you to one of the escape pods," Nathan began, but the prince shook his head, his jaw set. "No. If I flee, they will hunt me down across every star. They will never stop, and neither will your commanders. You don't understand, human. My existence is not merely a threat. It is a symbol. My survival burns a hole in the heart of both our empires." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the prince, at the burns that still smoldered faintly across his skin, and realized the truth. This wasn't just about saving one life. This was about defying the machinery of war itself. "Then what do we do?" Nathan asked. The prince's crystalline eyes locked onto his. "We fight, not for your side, not for mine, but for something that both our peoples have forgotten. Dignity, life, freedom." Before Nathan could respond, a squad of enemy soldiers stormed into the hangar, their armor gleaming with the alien empire's insignia. Their weapons rose, aiming directly at the prince. Nathan reacted before thought could intervene. He leapt from cover, pulse pistol blazing, dropping 2 of them before they even fired. The prince, despite his wounds, surged forward with a guttural cry, seizing one soldier by the throat and hurling him into the flames of the ruptured shuttle. They fought side by side, man and alien, against a tide that should have swallowed them whole. Gunfire screams fire. The hangar became a crucible, and within it, something unthinkable began to form. Not trust, not yet, but understanding. And as the last soldier fell, smoke swirling around them, Nathan turned to the prince, his chest heaving, his uniform scorched anew. "Then we do this together," Nathan said. The prince nodded, blood dripping from his lip, his crystalline eyes gleaming with defiance. "Together," he agreed, the word carrying the weight of a vow. Outside, in the vast cold of space, fleets gathered and war raged on. But inside the battered hangar of the Resolute Dawn, a human and an alien prince stood side by side, bound not by orders, not by oaths to their empires, but by a fragile, dangerous choice, to fight for something neither side wanted them to remember: humanity. And it was only the beginning. The furnace had been shut down for days now, its towering chambers still scorched with the memory of what had almost happened. The alien prince, once broken and discarded, was alive only because a human had refused to let fire claim him. But survival had not come without cost. Scars still ran deep across his skin, burns that marked his near end and a past he could not shake. The ship, a battered freighter that had been stolen out of desperation, floated now in the quiet dark between sectors, its engines running on fumes, and its crew reduced to 2 unlikely fugitives. The human pilot, Yarrick, and the alien prince, Kale, lived in that fragile balance of silence and survival, knowing both empire and rebellion hunted them now. Yarrick had not only defied an execution order, he had ripped apart the very narrative both sides believed, that aliens and humans were destined only to kill or enslave one another. That act of defiance had put them beyond the safety of flags and laws, beyond loyalty and command. It had left them with only each other. Kale had not spoken much in the days after his rescue. His voice had cracked when he tried, his throat blistered by smoke inhalation. But even as his body healed, silence remained his shield. Yarrick didn't push him. He understood what it was to carry pain deeper than words could reach. Instead, he patched the ship, rationed supplies, and every now and then left small gestures in Kale's path: an extra blanket folded neatly, a nutrient pack adjusted to match the alien prince's physiology, the furnace bay locked and sealed so that Kale would never have to see it again. Yet, something unspoken grew between them. It wasn't just gratitude, and it wasn't just survival. It was the quiet acknowledgement that, in a universe built on divisions, they had chosen each other over orders, over empire, over fear. When Kale finally spoke again, it was not to thank Yarrick, but to warn him. "They will not stop hunting us," he said one night as he stood in the observation deck, staring at a stretch of cold stars. His voice was rough, like stone scraped against metal, but steady. "My people will call me traitor for surviving by a human's hand. Yours will brand you deserter and criminal. Neither side forgives betrayal." Yarrick had leaned against the railing, tired eyes watching him. "Then maybe it's time neither of us care what they call us. I didn't drag you out of that fire for medals or approval. I did it because you're alive, because you deserve to be alive." Kale turned then, his alien features stark under starlight, scars running like rivers across his temple. "Even if it costs you everything." Yarrick held his gaze. It already did. That night something shifted. The wall of silence between them cracked, not in grand declarations, but in smaller ways. Kale began to share fragments of his past, how he had been taken prisoner during the war, paraded as a symbol of conquest, and finally discarded like scrap into the furnace when his value waned. Yarrick, in turn, spoke of the chain of command that had strangled him, of years of being told who to fight and who to hate, until that day he had decided enough was enough. Their stories, though carved by different empires, had the same shape. Both were tools used and thrown away by those in power. That recognition bound them tighter than any uniform or crest ever could. But the galaxy had a way of tearing open wounds just when they began to heal. Their stolen ship drifted too close to a patrol line, a human fleet vessel locking onto them with scanners sharp enough to cut. Warnings flared across the console. Unidentified craft, power down and prepare to be boarded. Yarrick cursed under his breath, hands flying over the controls. They'll scan us, see who's on board. They'll know I'm not alone. Kale's voice was calm, too calm. They will kill you for aiding me. Kill me for existing. We cannot let them board. Yarrick knew the truth of it, and yet a deeper dread rose in him, the possibility of losing what little they had built together. He did what no sane pilot would have done. He cut engines, let the ship drift cold and silent, masking itself in the debris field of an old battlefield. Static crackled across the comms as the patrol demanded compliance, but Yarrick shut it out. He glanced at Kale, whose scars caught the dim glow of emergency lights, and in that silence both understood. They were not going back. They had chosen exile over capture, each other over duty. The patrol ships scanned and prowled, but the debris field was vast, littered with old war wreckage, and by sheer chance, or perhaps fate, they slipped away unseen. In the hours after, Yarrick collapsed into the pilot's chair, exhaustion dragging his body down. Kale watched him quietly, then stepped closer. For the first time since the furnace, he reached out, his scarred hand resting against Yarrick's shoulder. You risked your life again. Why? Yarrick looked up at him, eyes bloodshot but unwavering. Because you're not just some alien prince to me anymore. You're the only person in this void who understands what it means to lose everything. I won't let them take you. Those words hung heavy, not as a promise, but as truth. Kale closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was no hesitation left. Then we stand together, not as soldier and prisoner, not as human and alien, as something they will never understand. And in that moment, the furnace scars ceased to be just wounds. They became proof of survival, of defiance, of a bond forged in fire itself. Their journey did not end in triumph or parades. There were no songs sung of them, no flags raised in their honor. Instead, they vanished into the uncharted dark, ghosts in a galaxy that had no place for them. Yet in that exile lay freedom. Yarrick had torn Kale from death's grip, and Kale had given Yarrick something just as rare, a reason to keep going when everything else had burned away. In the end, they were not prince and pilot, not traitor and deserter. They were two souls who had defied the furnace of empire and found life in the ashes. And as their ship drifted beyond the last mapped star, Kale spoke one final vow. As long as we breathe, we will not be what they made us. We will be what we choose. Yarrick met his eyes, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Not the weary smile of a soldier, but the quiet one of a man who had finally found a reason to believe. Together, scarred and hunted but unbroken, they disappeared into the stars. Not lost, not defeated, but free.